Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on an exploration that really, I think, reshapes how we think about science, spirituality, and, well, our own inner experience. If
Definitely.
you've ever wondered if the profound aspects of human life could actually be understood with scientific precision, then yeah, prepare for some fascinating insights.
Mhm.
We're diving into how we can measure the tangible impact of spiritual engagement, identify its precise causes, and trace its effects with a level of scientific rigor that might just surprise you.
And we're here to anchor this deep dive in, well, meticulous detail. It's grounded in truly groundbreaking research.
Right.
This discussion is based on the upcoming doctoral thesis by Mila Blumard-Dunn III, a project really set to redefine scientific inquiry into consciousness.
Wow.
What's crucial to understand, I think, is that this work isn't about validating any specific belief system. Not at all. It's about scientifically validating the real biological, psychological, and neurological transformations that, can be rigorously observed and measured within individuals.
That phrase you mentioned, causal relationships, that feels really key here.
It is.
Because for a long time, spiritual experiences have often been seen as something, well, solely personal, right? Anecdotal, maybe just a matter of faith, kind of beyond reach for science.
Exactly. The woo-woo label often gets thrown around.
Yeah, people might say, you can't really put a number on inner peace. But this work, it sounds like it aims for a seismic shift.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about quantifying these experiences, it's about proving how they are caused, really demonstrating the measurable reality of what happens when you engage in practices you define as spiritual.
The audacious proposition forging causality, where only correlation dared to whisper.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Ev-
Our journey starts by tackling a long-standing challenge in traditional science.
Mm.
For centuries, spiritual practices, the search for meaning, they've mostly lived in the realms of philosophy or theology.
Right. Which offer incredible insights, of course.
Absolutely.
Mm.
But they haven't typically provided the empirical tools to assess the precise mechanisms and measurable outcomes of spiritual engagement, the way that's, data-driven, reproducible.
Yeah, the quantitative side has been tricky.
The challenge, naturally, is taking something as subjective, as personal as spiritual experience, and applying a rigorous scientific lens without stripping it of its profound meaning.
Which is a delicate balance.
But that's precisely the audacious proposition here, isn't it?
It is.
I like the analogy you sometimes use. Think about forensic investigations like the FBI.
Okay.
They meticulously dissect complex human actions, analyze patterns, predict trajectories even, with remarkable accuracy. They take seemingly chaotic behavior and bring this, astonishing scientific order to it. Verifiable predictive power.
They find the signal in the noise.
Exactly. So the question this research asks is, why limit that powerful analytical rigor just to dysfunction or pathology?
Right. Why not apply it to the positive?
Why not apply that same methodology to the most profound, enriching aspects of human experience? We're sort of profiling the profound, trying to map the bio-behavioral pathways to peace, resilience, well-being.
That's precisely it. Our core proposition is this. If we can observe and infer the causal impact of complex behaviors like criminal actions, often with, frankly, limited data,
Right.
then surely with even greater precision and far more sophisticated instruments, we can definitively observe the causal impact of intentional, defined spiritual behaviors.
On what specifically?
On an individual's physiological responses, their psychological states, and yes, even the actual neural architecture of their brain.
So moving beyond just seeing things happen together.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the clear shift we're making from mere correlation things just happening together, like people who meditate seem calmer, to definitive causation, proving that one event or action directly causes another.
So not just meditators are calmer, but meditation causes specific brainwave shifts that lead to measurable stress hormone reduction.
Precisely. That's the scientific revolution in this space. And let me be clear, this isn't some, vague hand-wavy thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about establishing gold standard randomized controlled trials, RCTs. That's the unshakable bedrock of medical validation.
The same standard used for testing new drugs.
Exactly the same rigor. Imagine a study, right? Meticulously designed with 3 key groups.
Okay.
First, the spiritual intervention group. These participants consistently practice a precisely defined spiritual technique, maybe structured mindfulness, specific contemplative prayer, gratitude practices, a set protocol.
Got it.
Second, the active control group. This group does similar activities, same time commitment, but without the spiritual component. Maybe health education, non-spiritual relaxation.
Why is that group so important?
Crucial. It helps us ensure any effect we see are due to the spiritual bit itself, not just, social interaction or simply doing something structured. It isolates the active ingredient, so to speak.
Makes sense. And the third group?
The untreated control group. They receive no intervention during the study period. They give us our baseline.
Okay.
Then, using cutting-edge tech, we measure. We don't just ask, do you feel better? We aim for irrefutable data.
Like what?
Does your autonomic nervous system demonstrably rebalance? Do your stress hormones, like cortisol, measurably drop? Does your brain literally, observably rewire itself in response to consistent practice?
Wow.
This is how we move from, I believe this works, which is fine personally, to we have scientific proof this works.
And central to this, you mentioned the concept of spiritual weight. Can you unpack that? It sounds intriguing.
Great. Spiritual weight. It's not some abstract mystical idea in this context. It's framed as a precisely defined, quantifiable, multidimensional construct. We see it as the demonstrable causal impact, the verifiable consistency of doing the practice, and the distinct, reproducible, physiological, psychological, and neural changes that arise directly from those spiritual actions.
Like working out builds physical muscle.
Exactly the analogy. Consistent exercise builds physical weight, muscle, endurance. Similarly, consistent spiritual practice, as defined here, builds spiritual weight, a measurable increase in your capacity for, say, peace, resilience, compassion, cognitive flexibility.
So it becomes tangible, measurable.
That's the goal. This meticulous, data-driven approach is what elevates the study of something seemingly intangible like spirituality into rigorous scientific inquiry.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? It's really about transforming subjective experience into something objective, quantifiable, while still respecting the profound personal meaning it holds.
The mechanistic blueprint deconstructing the how and why of embodied transformation.
Okay, so now that we've talked about how we can prove causality, let's dive into the really fascinating part, the how and why.
Right, the mechanisms.
Yeah, this is where we peel back the layers, molecular, neural, psychological, to understand the actual machinery driving these transformations. We're not just showing that something happens.
But how it happens, the elegant design underneath.
Exactly.
Well, to understand these mechanisms, we often draw on frameworks like the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just fight or flight, right?
Way beyond. It offers a much more sophisticated view of our autonomic nervous system. Porges describes three main branches of the vagal nerve.
Okay.
There's the ventral vagal complex that's linked to feelings of safety, social engagement, calm. Then the dorsal vagal complex associated with immobilization, the freeze response, and of course, the sympathetic nervous system driving fight or flight.
And the key insight is,
The brilliance is how it shows our subjective feelings of safety are directly tied to the physiological state of our vagal nerve. A healthy, robust vagal tone lets us stay resilient and connected, even when things get tough.
okay, here's where it gets really interesting for, your daily life. When you do deep diaphragmatic breathing in meditation,
Mm-hmm.
or the rhythmic chanting in prayer, or those slow, deliberate movements in Tai Chi, you're not just relaxing vaguely.
No, it's quite specific.
You are actively, purposefully stimulating your vagus nerve. That cranial nerve, it's like a superhighway for calming your whole system, promoting social connection.
That's the hypothesis we're testing rigorously.
And we aim to show, conclusively, that this deliberate vagal stimulation will causally enhance your vagal tone.
Leading to immediate, objectively measurable changes in
Heart rate variability.
HRV.
Exactly. HRV, that beat-to-beat variation in your heart rate, it's a clear, empirically validated biomarker
Of what exactly?
of a resilient, balanced nervous system. Higher HRV generally means more adaptability, better stress handling. So imagine knowing your meditation isn't just a feeling of calm.
But it's physically retraining your body's resilience, beat by beat. That's powerful.
Hugely powerful. What else is in this mechanistic blueprint?
Well, beyond direct physiology, we integrate insights from embodied cognition and predictive processing frameworks.
Okay, what do those tell us?
Basically, these theories suggest our minds aren't separate from our bodies. They're intrinsically linked. Your physical experiences, your actions, they actively shape your thoughts, emotions, perceptions.
So the body influences the mind just as much as the other way around.
Precisely. And the postures, gestures, ritualized movements in many spiritual practices, they aren't just symbolic fluff.
They're active agents.
Yes, they are powerful agents that recalibrate your brain's predictive models. Think about the upright posture in meditation, specific hand mudras, kneeling,
They're sending signals.
rich feedback to your brain, actively shaping perception and emotion. When you consciously adopt a posture of gratitude, maybe an open chest, a slight smile, you're not just expressing it.
Inducing it.
You are causally inducing and reinforcing the neural pathways for that emotion, priming yourself to feel and act with genuine gratitude. It's this undeniable, embodied, causal feedback loop. The physical act literally molds your inner landscape.
Wow, okay. Let's unpack this with the brain itself then. Neuroplasticity.
Ah, yes. The brain's amazing ability to rewire itself.
We used to think the adult brain was pretty much fixed, right?
We did. But now we know it's incredibly dynamic. Experience changes it.
So the core hypothesis here is
That consistent spiritual practices will causally induce measurable structural and functional alterations in the brain's very fabric.
and there's already some evidence suggesting that.
Oh, yes. Studies suggest meditation might increase gray matter volume in key regions: insula, anterior cingulate cortex, prefrontal cortex, areas crucial for attention, emotional regulation.
So we're asking questions like, does consistent prayer cause measurable increases in neural connections for empathy?
Exactly. Or does breath-anchored contemplation causally dampen the default mode network, that mind-wandering network?
Leading to more presence, maybe less rumination?
Potentially, yes. So what does this mean for you? These aren't just philosophical ponderings anymore.
They're testable hypotheses.
Empirically testable, data-driven hypotheses with profound, potentially life-altering implications for understanding consciousness and well-being.
Okay, one more mechanism.
Finally, yes, we delve into the mechanics of cognitive reappraisal and effective regulation.
Dealing with difficult emotions.
Exactly. Spiritual traditions for millennia have offered robust strategies for coping with life stressors. Cognitive reappraisal is a powerful one.
What is that exactly?
It's where you consciously reinterpret an event that causes emotion. You change your relationship to the difficult situation.
Okay.
And spiritual narratives, spiritual wisdom, they offer incredibly powerful tools for this adaptive reappraisal.
Like reframing loss as spiritual growth.
Or seeing a challenge as an opportunity to strengthen resolve, for example. This isn't just thinking positively in a superficial way.
It's deep.
It's an active, causal restructuring of your emotional landscape, which raises a really important question.
Which is?
How will the dissertation empirically demonstrate how specific spiritual cognitive strategies, like cultivating compassion, practicing forgiveness, maybe offering up suffering in some traditions, how do these causally impact things like perceived stress, chronic anxiety, and ultimately bolster resilience and life satisfaction?
That feels like the bridge.
It truly bridges ancient, profound wisdom with cutting-edge modern cognitive neuroscience.
The definitive methodology orchestrating the data for unassailable causal proof.
All right, now for the nitty-gritty. How is this research actually done? This isn't just simple surveys, right?
Not at all. This is designed as a precision operation, a breathtaking data symphony, really. Meticulously orchestrated to produce clear, undeniable causal evidence.
And the foundation is?
Our methodological cornerstone is the gold standard multi-arm randomized controlled trial, the RCT. For any serious scientist looking at cause and effect, this is the benchmark.
Okay, so walk us through that rigor. How do you apply it to something as nuanced as spiritual practice?
It starts with rigorous initial screening, detailed interviews, psychometric assessments, baseline physiological scans, neurophysiological scans.
Yeah, and that starting point.
Exactly. That meticulous baseline data is our 0 point for tracking transformation. Then, eligible participants are randomly assigned to one of several carefully designed groups.
And random assignment is key because
That's absolutely critical. It ensures that any differences we see later are solely due to the intervention itself, not some pre-existing factor we didn't account for. It eliminates bias.
Right. So tell us about these groups again in detail.
Sure. We'll have spiritual intervention groups, each practicing a precisely defined technique daily for a set time. Maybe structured MBSR, maybe a specific contemplative prayer routine, replicable protocols.
Got it.
Then, the crucial active control group. Similar time commitment, interaction, but activities without the specific spiritual component, like general health education or non-spiritual relaxation techniques.
To isolate the spiritual ingredient.
Exactly. Controls for non-specific effects, placebo, routine. We also have an untreated control group as a natural baseline, and, uniquely, an established practitioners cohort.
People already doing this stuff long term.
Yes, individuals with long-standing practices, they give us real-world benchmarks, insights into long-term effects, spiritual action archetypes, you might say.
And this isn't just a one-off measurement, right? You mentioned longitudinal.
Absolutely. We're not just taking a snapshot. We're capturing the whole movie of transformation with a longitudinal multi-phase design.
We know.
Comprehensive assessments at baseline, continuous data collection during the intervention, immediate post-intervention evaluations, and then crucial follow-ups 3 months, 6 months, even 12 months later.
So you can trace the whole causal arc over time.
Precisely. And here's a really powerful aspect of the methodology, kind of the kicker.
Oh.
We're strategically embedding acute challenge paradigms.
Stress tests in the lab.
Exactly. Precisely engineered stress tests. During controlled lab visits, participants undergo brief, standardized stressors, maybe the Trier social stress test, maybe a cold pressor task, immediately followed by either their assigned spiritual practice or a control activity.
Why do that?
It allows us to directly observe and quantify at a very granular level how specific spiritual practices impact the stress response itself, how you react, how quickly you recover physiologically.
Wow. Okay. That's intense. Now, the data itself. How do you collect all this information? It sounds like a lot.
It is exhaustive, yes. Multimodal data collection. We weave together a high-resolution tapestry of evidence, leaving hopefully little room for ambiguity.
So what kinds of data?
First, precision behavioral observation. This is about objectively measuring what people are actually doing during their practice. Using ethically designed wearable and ambient cameras coupled with advanced computer vision and machine learning. Micropostural dynamics, gesture analysis, even facial action coding systems, eye movements. Unprecedented objective data on the cause, the actual observable spiritual behavior.
Okay, that's the behavior. What about the body's response?
Second, high-fidelity physiological and neurophysiological monitoring. This is where the body tells its story.
Like wearables.
Medical-grade wearable biosensors, yes. Giving us ECG-accurate heart rate variability, HRV, for nervous system resilience, electrodermal activity, EDA, skin conductivity for real-time arousal and stress, mobile EEG systems,
Brainwaves.
measuring brain activity changes, alpha power, theta power, gamma coherence linked to relaxation, insight, integration, and neuroendocrine biomarker assays.
Hormone levels.
Things like diurnal cortisol slopes showing chronic stress patterns and maybe BDNF, important for brain health. Objective, long-term indicators.
Okay, objective physical data. What about the subjective experience?
Crucial third piece, high-frequency self-report measures. Objective data is paramount, but subjective experience provides vital context.
How do you capture that systematically?
Tools like ecological momentary assessment, EMA, via an AI-powered app, asking people how they feel in real time in their daily lives. Daily digital narrative journals for richer qualitative data. Validated psychometric scales, pre-post follow-up for well-being, mindfulness, stress, etc.
And interviews.
And deep phenomenological interviews using AI-assisted transcription and thematic analysis to really explore the subjective meaning-making, the perceived mechanisms of change, getting the nuances.
Okay, that is a mountain of data. How on earth do you make sense of it all and actually prove causality?
That requires the true intellectual firepower, advanced data analytics, and a definitive causal inference strategy.
This isn't just about pretty graphs, then.
Oh no, this is about rigorous, undeniable proof of causal chains.
What kind of techniques are we talking about?
Sophisticated ones. Granger causality testing, for instance. It statistically determines if one-time series, say, minutes of meditation, unambiguously precedes and predicts changes in other series, like HRV.
So proving A happens before B and predicts B.
Essentially, yes, showing predictive power. We'll also use structural equation modeling, SEM, specifically with latent growth curve modeling. This lets us model complex causal pathways over time, treating concepts like spiritual engagement as latent variables.
Okay.
We might use robust econometric techniques like difference of differences, DID, or regression discontinuity, designs to isolate causal effects by cleverly comparing groups or changes around a threshold.
And finding the why and for whom.
Exactly. That's mediation and moderation analysis. Mediation helps us identify why it works, the intermediate steps, like practice leads to better vagal tone, which then leads to reduced anxiety.
The mechanism.
Yes. And moderation helps us understand for whom it might be most effective, maybe based on personality, genetics, baseline stress levels.
You mentioned AI.
Yes. Finally, we plan to use individualized causal mapping with advanced machine learning, leveraging generative AI. This moves beyond group averages to personalized insights. Identifying highly personalized causal signatures, building predictive models for how a specific person might respond, constructing dynamic, real-time spiritual action archetypes, showing how spiritual weight builds differently for different people. Generative AI could even simulate what-if scenarios for personalized interventions.
Wow. And tying the numbers and the stories together.
That's the rigorous mixed methods integration, the synergy between objective data and subjective experience. Qualitative informs quantitative, quantitative contextualizes qualitative. It's about a holistic, robust understanding.
The causal unraveling, proving the power, transforming the narrative, illuminating the human condition.
Okay, so the payoff, the grand reveal. After all this meticulous work, what do you actually expect to find? What's the ultimate goal here?
Well, the ultimate goal is about unleashing the verifiable, reproducible, undeniable power of these practices into the real world for tangible, measurable, and profound human flourishing.
And you expect the data will show this.
We anticipate a resounding confirmation. We expect to unequivocally demonstrate clear causal links between the consistent practice of these specific spiritual interventions and measurable, sustained, clinically meaningful changes in participants.
Changes significantly greater than the control groups.
Absolutely. That's key for proving causality, leaving no doubt about the direct influence of the spiritual practices themselves.
Can you give us some specific examples of the kinds of transformative effects you anticipate proving?
Sure, let's break it down. Physiological causality. We expect to see sustained increases in resting heart rate variability, HRV.
Meaning better adaptability, resilience.
Exactly. Robust reductions in diurnal cortisol slopes indicating less chronic stress, a more normalized stress curve, and dramatically enhanced autonomic flexibility, faster recovery during those acute stress tests we talked about.
Okay, what about the brain?
Neurophysiological causality. Quantifiable increases in specific brainwave patterns like alpha and theta power.
Linked to relaxation, introspection.
Yes. And heightened gamma coherence, sometimes associated with insight or integration. Shifts in frontal alpha asymmetry, potentially indicating more positive effect.
And structural changes.
We expect structural and functional neuroplasticity. Maybe increases in gray matter or cortical thickness in areas like the prefrontal cortex, insula, limbic regions. And changes in functional connectivity, perhaps decreased activity in the default mode network linked to rumination, and increased connectivity between the DMN and executive control networks.
Fascinating. And psychologically.
Psychological causality. Measurable increases in things like spiritual well-being, psychological resilience, treat compassion, meaning in life.
And reductions in negative states.
Substantial reductions in anxiety, depressive symptoms, perceived stress, and critically, we'll look for dose-dependent relationships.
More practice equals more change.
That would be strong evidence for causality, yes.
And finally, observable behavior.
Behavioral causality. We anticipate observable, quantifiable shifts in daily life. Increases in prosocial acts, perhaps. Enhanced presence or engagement. Improved sleep quality. More adaptive coping strategies when stressors hit.
So this means we'll actually be able to quantify that elusive spiritual weight you mentioned earlier.
With precise, data-driven causal impact metrics, that's the aim.
Can you give an example of what that might look like, quantified?
Imagine seeing a scientifically validated statement like, this specific mindfulness practice, when performed 20 minutes daily for 8 weeks, yields, on average, a 0.8 standard deviation causal increase in vagal tone, as measured by HRV, compared to an active control group.
That's specific.
Or maybe. This particular contemplative prayer technique, practiced daily, causes a verifiable 25% reduction in amygdala reactivity during a simulated social stress test, and concurrently leads to a 1.2-point causal increase on a 5-point self-compassion scale.
That moves us way beyond just anecdotes.
Absolutely. From vague notions to hard, reproducible, quantifiable outcomes, it brings these practices into the same empirical conversation as pharmacology or physical therapy.
And you mentioned understanding the how and why behind these numbers.
Exactly. What's fascinating isn't just that it works, but how it works. Our robust mediation analyses will aim to delineate the intricate neurobiological and psychological mechanisms.
It's like connecting the dots.
Precisely. For instance, we could potentially show definitively that the causal link between, say, breath-focused meditation and reduced anxiety is mediated by both improved vagal tone and an enhanced capacity for adaptive cognitive reappraisal, unveiling the whole causal chain.
Now, this raises an important question, doesn't it? Is this leading to a one-size-fits-all spiritual pill?
Excellent question, and the answer is emphatically no. This research is absolutely not about finding some universal spiritual prescription.
So how do you avoid that?
We are diving deep into personalized causal trajectories. That's where the machine learning and AI come in again, developing those dynamic, evolving spiritual action archetypes.
Meaning,
Distinct causal response profiles that account for individual differences. Imagine scientifically knowing which specific practice or combination of practices is likely to causally benefit you the most,
based on my unique profile.
based on your unique biobehavioral and neurophysiological blueprint, your baseline stress, your personality, maybe even genetics down the line.
That sounds like precision medicine.
It is precision medicine applied to the soul, if you will, tailored pathways to well-being.
So what does this all mean in the broader context? There's an ethical dimension here too, right?
Hugely important. Throughout this ambitious project, our ethical stance is paramount. This research is designed to demonstrate the demonstrable causal effects of engaging in specific, measurable behaviors
Behaviors, not beliefs per se.
on observable biological and psychological systems. It does not, and scientifically cannot, explicitly validate or invalidate metaphysical beliefs about the existence or nature of spirit itself.
Why that distinction?
Because our scientific tools operate within the realm of the measurable, the reproducible, instead, what it does provide is an unprecedented scientific lens to understand, with empirical certainty, how human beings embody, experience, and are causally shaped by their deepest beliefs and their consistent engagement in practices they define as spiritual.
So it respects the boundary between science and metaphysics.
That nuanced yet firm stance is vital for scientific integrity and, frankly, for building bridges of understanding across diverse perspectives. Outro.
Wow. What we've explored in this deep dive is, it really feels like just the beginning, doesn't it?
It really does. Foundational work.
The audacious proposition, the mechanistic blueprint, that incredibly definitive methodology, and the anticipated causal unraveling. These feel like pillars for a genuinely new scientific frontier. This research, it seems poised to become a pinnacle validation for the tangible, observable, costly, attributable effects of human engagement with what is perceived as sacred, however one defines that, transcending specific cultures or theologies.
By grounding it in rigorous science.
Yes, by grounding the study of spirituality in the most rigorous scientific principles we have, this work lays, really, an unshakable foundation for a new era of evidence-based spiritual well-being.
Forging that bridge.
Forging an undeniable scientific bridge between the inner world of human meaning and the outer world of empirical, quantifiable reality. It feels like it could forever alter our understanding of human potential and maybe the very definition of flourishing.
And perhaps a final thought for our listeners. Consider how this kind of scientific approach to spirituality, focusing on the practice and its effects, could fundamentally shift things.
Like what?
Societal priorities, maybe healthcare models, certainly individual approaches to self-improvement, moving us away from guesswork towards empirically proven pathways for genuine well-being.
Something powerful to think about. If you've been fascinated by today's deep dive into the causal arc of spirit, make sure to find us on social media. We're at DragonWise88 for more insights and discussions.
Please join the conversation.
And please, if you liked what you heard today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support really helps us continue to bring you these cutting-edge explorations. Join us next time as we delve into the uncharted frontiers that this foundational work makes possible, opening up, hopefully, new vistas for human thriving.